The rich man, Mr. Harrington, sat alone at his table in a prestigious Mayfair establishment. The elegant murmur of the restaurant, the clink of crystal glasses, the hushed conversations, and the instrumental music seemed to envelop everything in a bubble of distant luxury, until a question pierced the air like an arrow straight to the heart. "Daddy, may I eat with you?" Mr. Harrington slowly lifted his gaze. Before him, with small hands clasped at her chest and large eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear, stood a street girl. Her simple beige dress was a little creased, her sandals worn, her blonde hair tangled by the wind. But her eyes held something Mr. Harrington couldn't ignore. On his table, a meticulously arranged dish, a gleaming glass of white wine under the warm garden lights. Everything was perfect. Everything was in its place, except for this girl. And for a few seconds that felt like an eternity, no one breathed. Behind Mr. Harrington, an elegant couple widened their eyes in astonishment. Another woman put a hand to her mouth as if witnessing something forbidden. A man murmured something about security. The atmosphere tensed, but Mr. Harrington looked at no one else, only her. The girl spoke again, almost a whisper. "I haven't eaten today, but I promise not to bother." The silence became heavier than gold. And in that instant, something stirred within Mr. Harrington. Something that had been dormant for years. But what he didn't yet know was that this simple question would force him to confront a truth he had avoided all his life. And what this girl carried with her would change his destiny forever. If this story has already touched your heart, subscribe to the channel now so you don't miss any story that transforms your way of seeing the world. And before continuing, tell us in the comments from which city you are listening to this story. We want to read you. Mr. Harrington looked at his plate again, then at the girl, and instead of calling the waiter, he did something that left everyone speechless. He slid his chair back slightly. "Sit," he said in a low voice. The girl didn't move at first. She seemed not to believe it. "Really?" she asked. "Yes, but first tell me your name." "Lily." "Mr." Harrington felt a strange pressure in his chest. That name held echoes of the past, echoes he had tried to silence for years. Lily sat carefully, as if fearing that at any moment someone would change their mind. Her small hands were a little dirty, but they trembled more from nerves than from cold. The waiter rushed over. "Sir, this isn't appropriate." Mr. Harrington raised a hand without looking at him. "Bring her a plate just like mine." The murmur around them increased. Some looked with disapproval, others with morbid curiosity, some with genuine surprise. But Mr. Harrington didn't take his eyes off the girl. "Where are your parents?" he asked seriously. Lily looked down. "I don't have a daddy, and Mummy is poorly." That phrase struck harder than any social criticism. Mr. Harrington felt a lump in his throat. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't pity. It was recognition. Because in those eyes there was something familiar, a mixture of pride and hunger, of dignity and need. "How old are you?" Five. Exactly the same age his daughter would be if he hadn't allowed pride to destroy his marriage years ago. The thought appeared unbidden. Mr. Harrington had built empires, signed multi-million-pound contracts without hesitation, dismissed executives without a blink, but at that moment he didn't know what to do with a girl who just wanted to share a table. The plate arrived. Lily looked at it as if it were a treasure, but she didn't start eating immediately. She looked at Mr. Harrington first. "Are you sure I can?" Mr. Harrington nodded, and when she took the first bite, something unexpected happened. It wasn't the scene, it wasn't the stares of others, it wasn't the gesture of charity. It was the way she closed her eyes as she tasted the food, as if it were the best gift in the world, as if she wasn't used to it, as if every bite were a miracle. And Mr. Harrington felt something he hadn't felt in years. Shame. Not for having money, but for never having looked beyond his own walls. "Do you always eat here?" he asked. Lily shook her head. "Only when someone lets me stay nearby. Sometimes I leave before they make me." Mr. Harrington pressed his lips together. "And today, why did you come to me?" The girl hesitated, looking at him intently. "Because you looked like someone I knew." Mr. Harrington's heart skipped a beat. "Who?" "My daddy," she whispered. The world seemed to stop. At another table, someone dropped a fork. Mr. Harrington felt the air grow denser. "Your daddy is." "I don't know," Lily replied with a sincerity that hurt. "Mummy says he left when I was a baby, but I think he'll come back someday." Mr. Harrington looked away for a second, not because he didn't want to see her, but because for the first time in a long time he feared someone was seeing him from within. "What if he doesn't come back?" he asked, almost in a whisper. Lily shrugged, with a mixture of innocence and forced maturity. Then I'll learn to be brave on my own." That phrase pierced Mr. Harrington like a mirror, because he had learned to be strong, but not brave. The difference was enormous. Strong was closing the heart, brave was opening it. And in that instant, Mr. Harrington began to suspect that this girl hadn't arrived at his table by chance. There was something more, something he still didn't understand, but that would soon force him to confront the past he had buried under contracts, travels, and silence. Lily continued eating slowly, with good manners. She didn't devour. She didn't ask for more. She only gave thanks with her eyes. And Mr. Harrington felt that every second by her side dismantled a part of the armor he had built over the years. However, what he didn't yet know was that someone, not far from there, was watching the scene with contained tears. And that person knew a secret that would change everything, because that girl hadn't chosen that table by chance. And that night would not be just any dinner. It would be the beginning of a truth that Mr. Harrington never imagined he would hear. And when that truth came to light, nothing would ever be the same. Lily finished her first plate with a delicacy that didn't match the life she seemed to lead. She left nothing, asked for no more, just took a small sip of water and looked at Mr. Harrington, as if she were grateful for something much greater than the food. Mr. Harrington was not used to that kind of gaze. He was used to interested glances, calculating glances, glances that evaluated how much they could get from him, but not that one. That was a clean gaze, a gaze that asked for no money, only presence. "Does your mum know you're here?" "Mr. Harrington asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Lily shook her head gently. "She's resting. When she wakes up, her chest hurts a lot, and she gets tired." "Mr. Harrington felt an uncomfortable pressure in his stomach. "Is she ill?" The girl nodded. "She says it's something in her heart, but I think it's sadness." That answer was not typical of a 5-year-old girl. Mr. Harrington stopped breathing for a second. Sadness. That word was too familiar to him. He had seen sadness in the face of the woman who once loved him. He had seen sadness when he decided to prioritize contracts over birthdays. He had seen sadness the day he heard the word divorce, but he had decided not to look back. Mr. Harrington had turned pain into productivity, abandonment into ambition, guilt into corporate expansion. And now, a little girl in front of him spoke of sadness, as if it were a physical illness. "Where do you live?" he asked cautiously. Lily pointed towards the main street. "In a small room. Mummy says it's temporary." Temporary. Mr. Harrington knew that word well. Many times he had said that his absence was temporary, that his travels were temporary, that his distance was temporary. But years were not temporary, nor were wounds. The restaurant remained silent. Some diners pretended not to look, but no one was indifferent. Mr. Harrington noticed a woman at the back observing them intently. It wasn't a curious gaze, it was an intense gaze, as if she were waiting for something. "Does your mum work?" he asked. Lily hesitated. "She used to. Now she can't do much." Mr. Harrington began to feel that each answer opened a door he preferred to keep closed. "And how do you eat?" Lily looked at him with brutal honesty. "Sometimes we eat, sometimes we don't." The phrase fell like a sentence. Mr. Harrington had investments in 3 countries, accounts that grew even while he slept, properties he didn't even visit. And in front of him was a girl who measured her life in sometimes. Sometimes we eat, sometimes we don't. For the first time in years, Mr. Harrington felt that success filled no real void. "Why did you approach my table specifically?" he asked softly. Lily looked at him intently. "Because you were alone." That answer caught him off guard. Mr. Harrington looked around. There were people, there was noise, there was luxury. But yes, he was alone. And when someone is alone, Lily continued, they need company. That girl wasn't asking for food. She wasn't asking for money. She wasn't asking for charity. She was offering something, presence. Mr. Harrington lowered his gaze, remembered nights in 5-star hotels, where the silence was louder than any city. He remembered long tables with executives, where no one spoke of anything real. He remembered the echo of his own empty house and understood something uncomfortable. He had built a life surrounded by people, but with no one. "Are you afraid of being alone?" he asked. Lily shook her head. "Not when I think my daddy might be somewhere thinking of me." Mr. Harrington felt the air grow heavier. "Do you miss him?" he asked. Lily nodded. "Even though I don't know him?" Yes. That phrase was like a mirror that doesn't forgive, because Mr. Harrington knew what it was like to be missed by someone he had decided not to see. He knew what it was like for a daughter to ask why daddy wasn't there. He knew what it was like to hear excuses and choose work. The past began to knock on the door of his consciousness, but he still didn't know that door was about to open completely. Suddenly, Lily did something unexpected. She extended her small hand towards Mr. Harrington's. "Thank you for letting me sit with you." The contact was minimal, but sufficient. Mr. Harrington didn't remember the last time someone took his hand without expecting something in return. He didn't remember the last time he felt tenderness without strategy. At that instant, the waiter returned uncomfortably. "Sir, the manager wants to speak with you." Mr. Harrington looked up. "Tell him I'm busy." The waiter hesitated. "It's about the girl." Mr. Harrington stood up slowly. The restaurant fell silent again. "The girl is with me," he said firmly, "and no one is going to remove her." It was the first time in a long time that he defended something that didn't generate profit. Lily looked at him as if she were seeing a hero, and that made him uncomfortable because he knew he wasn't. At least not yet. "Does your mum know you're looking for your daddy?" he asked, resuming the conversation. Lily looked down. "Mummy says we shouldn't bother those who don't want to stay." That phrase was a direct hit, because Mr. Harrington had been exactly that, someone who didn't want to stay. "But I think," Lily continued, "that sometimes people leave because they are scared." Mr. Harrington felt something break inside. Fear. Yes. He had been afraid. Afraid of not being enough. Afraid of failing. Afraid of losing control. Afraid of loving more than his pride allowed. And out of fear, he had lost more than he would ever admit aloud. "And, do you think your daddy is scared?" he asked. Lily looked at him with a wisdom that didn't match her age. "Yes, but one day he'll be brave, Mr. Harrington couldn't hold her gaze because at that moment he understood that the girl wasn't just talking about her father, she was talking about him. But there was still something more, something that didn't quite fit, something in Lily's eyes, in the way she looked at him, in the way she seemed to recognize him. And then something happened that left him completely motionless. From the other side of the restaurant, the woman who had been watching them began to approach slowly. Her steps were firm, her gaze intense, her eyes moist. Lily saw her first, and her expression changed. "Mummy." Mr. Harrington felt the world spin a little slower. The woman stopped a few steps away. She didn't seem surprised. She seemed determined. Mr. Harrington looked up at her, and something within his memory ignited. He had seen those eyes before. He had heard that voice in another time. He had felt those hands tremble from his absence. But it couldn't be. Not after so many years. The woman took a deep breath. "I didn't know I'd find you like this one day," she said with a contained voice. Mr. Harrington felt the past he had so painstakingly buried had just sat in front of him in the form of truth, and what he was about to hear would change everything he thought he knew about that girl and about himself. The restaurant seemed to have ceased to exist. The sound of cutlery, the soft music, the elegant conversations. Everything was suspended in a kind of invisible silence when Lily's mother stopped in front of the table. Mr. Harrington felt his heart pounding in his chest with a force he hadn't known in years. The woman wore no striking makeup or expensive clothes. Her dress was simple, her hair neatly tied back, but her eyes, those eyes hadn't changed. They were the same eyes that once looked at him with unconditional love, the same ones that asked him to stay, the same ones that filled with tears the day he decided to leave. She looked at him without hatred, without shouts, without immediate reproaches, only with a mature sadness, like someone who has already cried all they could cry. "I didn't know destiny would be so ironic," she finally said. Mr. Harrington did not respond. Lily looked from one to the other, not fully understanding the tension, but perceiving that something important was happening. "Mummy." "He let me sit down," the girl said with innocent pride. The woman nodded. "I saw." Mr. Harrington felt the pieces starting to fit, but he resisted accepting what his intuition was already shouting. "Do we know each other?" he asked, though deep down he knew the answer. The woman looked at him intently. "More than you imagine." The air grew denser. Mr. Harrington slowly stood up. His mind traveled back to a period he had decided to erase, to a small flat where love was greater than money, to promises made without solicitors, to a woman who believed in him when he had nothing. But he did have something, ambition. And as his ambition grew, so did the distance. "It can't be," he finally murmured. The woman held his gaze. "Yes, it can." Lily watched them curiously. "Mummy, do you know him?" The woman took a deep breath before responding. "Yes, darling." Mr. Harrington felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. The past wasn't knocking on the door. The past was sitting right in front of him. He tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. The woman took another step closer. "You left without looking back," she said with a firm but controlled voice. "You said it was temporary. You said you needed to grow. You said you'd come back when everything was stable." Mr. Harrington closed his eyes for an instant. Each phrase was an echo of decisions he had justified for years. "And while you grew," she continued, "I learned to survive." The restaurant remained silent. No one dared to interrupt. Lily looked at her mother, then at Mr. Harrington. "Is he?" she asked in a thin voice. The woman didn't answer immediately. She looked directly into Mr. Harrington's eyes. "You tell her." That challenge was more powerful than any accusation. Mr. Harrington felt his pride, that armor that had protected him for so long, begin to crack. He looked at Lily. Those eyes, that way of tilting her head, that expression when she smiled shyly. There was something undeniable, something he could no longer ignore. "I didn't know," he whispered. The woman didn't raise her voice. "You didn't ask." That phrase was more painful than any shout, because it was true. He didn't ask, he didn't call, he didn't return, he didn't investigate, he didn't want to know. He had chosen the comfort of ignorance. "Mummy," Lily tugged gently at her dress. "Is he my daddy?" Time stood still. Mr. Harrington felt his heart pounding in his ears. The woman knelt in front of the girl. "Yes, darling." The word fell like a definitive sentence. Lily looked at Mr. Harrington with a mixture of surprise, hope, and confusion. "Really?" Mr. Harrington couldn't hold her gaze because that word forced him to assume something he had avoided for 5 years. Responsibility. He wasn't just a successful businessman. He wasn't just a powerful man. He was a father, and he hadn't been there. Lily took a small step towards him. "Then why weren't you there?" The question carried no reproach. It carried innocence. But that innocence was more devastating than any adult accusation. Mr. Harrington felt something break inside his chest because he had no answer he could give a 5-year-old girl. He couldn't tell her about ambition. He couldn't tell her about contracts. He couldn't explain wounded pride. He could only admit an uncomfortable truth. "Because I was a coward." The woman looked at him, surprised by the honesty. Lily frowned slightly. "But I said one day my daddy would be brave." Mr. Harrington felt his eyes well up for the first time in years. "You're right," he said with a broken voice. "And I'm trying to start now." The woman crossed her arms. "Trying doesn't erase 5 years." "I know." That was the first time he didn't try to justify himself. He didn't blame destiny. He didn't blame work. He didn't blame anyone else. He took responsibility. The silence was profound. Lily looked at her mother, then at Mr. Harrington. "So, I'm not alone anymore?" That question was like a light cutting through the darkness. Mr. Harrington knelt to her height. "You never should have been." The woman looked away for a moment, holding back emotions she had learned to repress. "She doesn't know everything," she finally said. "She doesn't know about the nights without food. She doesn't know about the medical appointments I couldn't pay for. She doesn't know that my heart hurts not only from illness, but from abandonment." Mr. Harrington felt that every word was a mirror of his decisions. "Are you ill?" he asked with genuine concern. She nodded. "I need surgery, but I didn't come to ask you for anything." That phrase hit him even harder. There was no demand, no manipulation, just truth. "I didn't know anything," he repeated, though he already understood that phrase would not absolve him. "You didn't want to know," she corrected softly. Lily looked at Mr. Harrington's face as if trying to memorize every detail. "You look like me," she said with a small smile. Mr. Harrington felt that affirmation was a gift and a responsibility at the same time. The restaurant slowly began to regain its sound, but their table remained a world apart. "Where do you live?" he asked. The woman hesitated. Pride still existed. "I don't want your pity." "It's not pity," he responded firmly. "It's responsibility." The difference was enormous. The woman studied him intently. He wasn't looking for money. He was looking for truth. "If you're going to enter her life," she finally said, "you can't do it like someone signing a contract. You can't appear today and disappear tomorrow." Mr. Harrington felt the weight of each word because he knew that was his tendency. "I don't want to disappear again," he said with honesty. Lily took his hand again. Then, "Stay." 3 words, so simple, so powerful. Mr. Harrington understood that this night was not by chance. It was not charity. It was not coincidence. It was confrontation. Destiny had not led him to that table to pay for a dinner. It had led him to pay an emotional debt. But there was still something more, something the woman had not yet said, something that was still hidden, And when that last truth came to light, Mr. Harrington would have to decide if he was willing to lose his pride or lose everything again, because the real test would not be to recognize his daughter, it would be to prove that he could be the father she deserved. And that decision was about to come. The silence that followed Lily's words was not awkward. It was decisive. Mr. Harrington remained crouched in front of his daughter, feeling the weight of that small hand in his. It was not a fragile hand. It was a hand that had learned to fend for itself too soon. Lily's mother, Sarah, remained standing, observing him with a mixture of caution and weariness. There was no hatred in her gaze, but no trust either. There was something more complex, a silent evaluation. She wasn't seeing the man who had knelt before her daughter. She was seeing the man who once promised to stay. "If you truly want to be in her life," she finally said, with a firm but serene voice, "you can't do it halfway." Mr. Harrington slowly stood up. He no longer felt like the owner of an empire. He felt like a man facing a moral examination. "I don't want to do it halfway," he replied. She looked at him deeply. "Then listen to me closely." Lily watched them in silence, perceiving that something important was about to be defined. "I'm not going to accept money without commitment," Sarah continued. "I'm not going to allow you to appear as a hero for one night and disappear when the emotion fades." Mr. Harrington did not interrupt. "She doesn't need a sponsor," she added. "She needs a father." Those words embedded themselves with surgical precision in Mr. Harrington's chest. For years, he had solved problems by signing cheques. He had fixed mistakes by paying compensation. He had bought silence, loyalty, and opportunities. But this was not a financial negotiation. It was a test of character. "What do you need from me?" he finally asked. She did not hesitate. "Presence." The word resonated with unexpected force. Presence at medical appointments. Presence on difficult nights. Presence when she asks why you weren't there before. Presence when she's scared. Mr. Harrington felt that each phrase disarmed a part of his ego. "And if you decide to leave again," she continued, "you won't just break her. You'll break me again." The restaurant had returned to its usual rhythm, but for them, the world remained suspended. Lily looked at Mr. Harrington as if waiting for a promise she didn't know how to formulate. "I'm not leaving," he said with a conviction that surprised even himself. Sarah studied him in silence. "Time will tell that." That phrase was a clear line. Trust would not be immediate. Mr. Harrington took a deep breath. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about his agenda. He wasn't calculating risks. He wasn't evaluating profits. He was feeling, and that unsettled him more than any business crisis. "I need to see where you live," he finally said. She frowned slightly. "It's not a place you'll be proud of." "I didn't come to feel proud," he replied. "I came to take responsibility for what's mine." Sarah looked at him for several seconds. There was sincerity, but also uncertainty. "All right," she finally said. Lily smiled with contained joy. "Then let's go, the three of us." That simple phrase had enormous meaning. The three of us. Mr. Harrington felt that word carried a weight he had never considered. For years he had lived in the singular. My company, my goals, my success. Now there was a plural that demanded commitment. My daughter, her mother, our responsibility. They left the restaurant under curious glances. Some whispered, others observed with judgment. But Mr. Harrington looked at no one else. He walked beside Lily, conscious of every step. The girl took his hand without asking permission, and that naturalness moved him. There was no resentment in her, no reproach, only an openness he didn't know if he deserved. As they walked through less illuminated streets, the contrast became evident. Luxury was left behind. Golden lights turned into flickering street lamps. The impeccable pavement gave way to uneven footpaths. Mr. Harrington felt that every step took him away from his comfort zone and closer to a truth he couldn't ignore. They arrived at an old building with faded paint and windows that told stories of resilience. "Here," Sarah said. They climbed narrow stairs. Lily spoke with enthusiasm. "Mummy makes tasty soup when she can and reads me stories even when she's tired. And she says, the heart heals with hope." Mr. Harrington swallowed hard. That woman had not only raised his daughter alone, she had protected her innocence. They entered the small flat. It was modest, but it was clean, tidy, well kept. There were drawings taped to the wall, a small worn sofa, a simple table, no luxury. But there was something he didn't have in his mansion. Warmth. Mr. Harrington observed every detail as if he were evaluating a reality he never wanted to look at. "It's not much," Sarah said, anticipating judgment. "It's enough to show you fought," he replied. She looked at him with surprise. Lily ran to a drawer and pulled out a drawing. "Look," she said excitedly. "I made it for when my daddy came back." Mr. Harrington felt the air stop. It was a simple drawing. 3 figures, holding hands, a bright sun, a small house. Above, written in childlike letters, "My family, Mr." Harrington felt something break inside. There was a family drawn. A family that existed in his daughter's imagination, but which he had ignored in reality. "I kept it," Lily said, "because I knew one day it would happen." Mr. Harrington couldn't speak for a few seconds. Sarah watched him. She wasn't trying to move him. She was trying to understand if he was grasping the magnitude of what he had lost. "You need an operation," he finally said, returning to the pending conversation. She nodded. "Yes, and it's not cheap. I'll take care of it." She gently raised her hand. "I don't just want you to pay." Mr. Harrington looked at her, understanding what she was really asking for. "I want you to be in the waiting room. I want you to explain to your daughter why Mummy is going into surgery. I want that if something goes wrong, she isn't left alone." Mr. Harrington felt that every word forced him to leave behind his old self. He couldn't solve that with money, only with real commitment. "I will be there," he said. She held his gaze. Then, "Start now." Lily came closer and hugged Mr. Harrington's legs. A spontaneous, natural gesture, without reservations. He hesitated for a second and then hugged her awkwardly. He didn't know exactly how to do it, but he knew he didn't want to let her go. In that small flat, far from luxury and cameras, Mr. Harrington understood something fundamental. True power was not controlling markets. It was holding small hands when fear appeared. But there was still something more, something Sarah still hadn't said, a detail that would completely change the way he understood the past. She sat slowly on the sofa. "There's something you need to know." Mr. Harrington looked at her intently. "When I left the hospital the day she was born, I tried to call you." Mr. Harrington frowned. "I never received that call." She nodded. "I know, because someone blocked my number." The silence was immediate. "What do you mean?" She took a deep breath. "Your assistant at the time told me you didn't want to know anything, that you were focused on an important business, that I shouldn't insist." Mr. Harrington felt his blood run cold. He vaguely remembered that time, a crucial negotiation, an international trip, a series of filters on his phone to avoid distractions. "I never asked for that," he whispered. She looked at him with a mixture of sadness and resignation. "But you allowed it." That phrase was an unexpected blow. It wasn't just an external betrayal. It was a consequence of his own carelessness. He had delegated so much of his life that someone else decided what news reached him. And the most important news never arrived. Mr. Harrington felt a mixture of rage and guilt. He couldn't entirely blame a third party. He had built a wall around his time, and that wall blocked what mattered most. "I need to know everything," he said firmly. She nodded. "Then be prepared, because what's coming isn't comfortable." Mr. Harrington understood that the true story was just beginning. It wasn't just a reunion. It wasn't just a discovered daughter. It was a chain of ill-made decisions, a series of silences, a parallel life that grew without him. And now he would have to decide if he was willing to rebuild from the foundations. Because loving wouldn't be enough. He would have to prove it. And the test was just beginning. The small flat fell silent after that revelation. The number was blocked. The phrase kept echoing in Mr. Harrington's mind like an uncomfortable echo he couldn't turn off. For years he had believed that she had simply disappeared, that she had decided to move on with her life without him, that the silence was mutual. But now he understood that the silence was not accidental. It was a consequence. A consequence of a life so shielded that not even the birth of his daughter managed to break through the filters he himself had created. "I need to understand everything," he finally said in a low but firm voice. Lily's mother, Sarah, sat carefully on the sofa, as if her body carried more weight than it appeared. "The day she was born," she began, "I tried to call you more than 10 times. Mr. Harrington closed his eyes for an instant. 10 times. 10 opportunities that never reached him. "Then I went to your office," she continued. "Your assistant told me you were in an international meeting, that you couldn't be interrupted by personal matters." That phrase hit him with brutal clarity. Personal matters. His daughter had been classified as a distraction. Mr. Harrington felt a mixture of rage and shame. He remembered perfectly that negotiation, a multi-million-pound deal that marked the beginning of his global expansion. He had given clear instructions not to receive unnecessary calls, and unknowingly, he had closed the door to the most important thing in his life. "I didn't know you were pregnant," he whispered. She looked at him with a mixture of disbelief and sadness. I told you before you left. He shook his head slightly. I don't remember. She nodded with painful serenity. Because you were already thinking about your next trip. The silence was heavy. There were no shouts, no exaggerated drama, just a raw truth. Mr. Harrington understood that it wasn't a conspiracy. It wasn't solely the fault of an ambitious assistant or a cold system. It was the result of misplaced priorities. When I understood that you weren't coming back, she continued, I decided not to pursue you anymore. I didn't want my daughter to grow up feeling that her father didn't choose her. Mr. Harrington felt his heart constrict, because that was exactly the reality. He hadn't chosen her, not because he didn't want her, but because he never knew he should. But the effect was the same. Absence. Lily had fallen asleep on the small sofa, clutching her drawing, her innocence oblivious to the weight of that conversation. Mr. Harrington watched her with a mixture of tenderness and guilt. Why did you never try to find me afterwards? He asked. She took a deep breath. Because love isn't begged for. That phrase was a lesson in itself. Mr. Harrington had lived in a world where everything could be negotiated, where everything had a price, where everything could be adjusted with enough influence. But love doesn't work that way. I didn't come tonight to confront you, she continued. I came because Lily insisted she wanted to sit in that restaurant. She said her daddy might be there someday. Mr. Harrington felt a shiver. The girl hadn't chosen him by chance. She had recognized him. Without knowing him, she had felt something. She always looked at men who resembled you, Sarah said. She always held out hope. Mr. Harrington clenched his fists. There was a part of him that wanted to turn back time, to go back to the day he decided to leave, to the moment he chose the contract instead of the conversation. But time doesn't negotiate, and he knew that better than anyone. When did you know you were ill? He asked carefully. She looked down at her hands. A year ago, heart problems. I need surgery soon. And how have you managed all this alone? She looked at him with a faint, tired smile. How do mothers do it when they have no choice? That answer had no heroism. It had reality. Mr. Harrington walked slowly around the small flat, observed the simple table, the old refrigerator, the medicines on the shelf. Every detail was tangible proof of a life that existed without him, a life that fought without his support. I'm going to transfer money right now, he said, taking out his phone. She stood up. Wait. Mr. Harrington looked at her. I don't want this to start with a bank transfer. He frowned. You need the surgery. Yes, she replied. But I need to know if you also need to change. That question left him motionless. He had never considered his own emotional need. He had always believed that success was enough. What do you mean? She looked at him with direct honesty. If you only come to solve everything with money, you'll leave again when you feel you've fulfilled your obligation. Mr. Harrington slowly put his phone away. I don't want to fulfill, I want to stay. The words came out without calculation, and that scared him, because staying implied giving up certain things. It implied reorganizing priorities. It implied making space for someone else. It implied vulnerability. Then, start with something small, she said. What? Stay tonight, Mr. Harrington felt a slight vertigo. His agenda was full. He had an early meeting, a flight scheduled, but for the first time none of those things seemed urgent. He looked at Lily sleeping, her small, quiet breathing, her hand still clutching the drawing of My Family. Mr. Harrington understood that this was the first real test. Not a surgery, not a transfer, but presence. I'm staying, he finally said. She watched him, looking for any sign of doubt. She found none. The sofa isn't comfortable, she warned. I didn't come for comfort. That phrase marked an invisible turning point. That night he wouldn't sleep in his king-size bed. There would be no room service. There would be no controlled silence. There would be reality. As they prepared a blanket for him, Mr. Harrington felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Humility. Not the feigned humility in conferences. Not the strategic humility in front of investors. Real humility. He sat on the sofa next to Lily. The girl moved slightly in her sleep and, without opening her eyes, murmured, Daddy. Mr. Harrington felt something unravel within his chest. That simple murmur was worth more than any signed contract. Sarah watched in silence from the small kitchen. She wasn't completely convinced, but she had seen something different in him, something that wasn't there before. Mr. Harrington looked up at her. I'm sorry, he finally said. It wasn't an elaborate speech. It wasn't a defense. It wasn't an extensive explanation. It was a simple apology, and in that simplicity there was truth. She held his gaze. "Don't tell me," she replied. "Show her. Mr." Harrington nodded. He knew that words were insufficient. That night, as the small flat fell into shadow, Mr. Harrington understood something fundamental. Success is not measured in figures. It is measured in absences. And he had accumulated too many. But there was still time, perhaps not to erase, but to rebuild. And as Lily slept with her hand resting on his, Mr. Harrington made the most important decision of his life. He would not invest in another company. He would invest in staying. However, the true test would not be that night. It would be the next day, when the corporate world called, when the pressures returned, when his partners questioned his change. That's when it would be known if his transformation was a momentary emotion or the beginning of a new version of himself. And dawn was just a few hours away. Dawn crept timidly through the small window of the flat. There were no silk curtains, no smart home system programming the light, no assistants waiting for instructions, just a golden ray illuminating Lily's sleeping face and Mr. Harrington sitting on the sofa, awake for hours. He hadn't been able to sleep, not because the sofa was uncomfortable, but because reality weighed more heavily than any luxury mattress. He watched his daughter breathe, with the tranquility only children have when they feel protected. And he understood something painful. She slept peacefully because she believed her daddy was there, but he knew he hadn't yet proven anything. Sarah emerged from the bedroom with slow steps. Her face showed the accumulated fatigue of years, but also a new expression, cautious hope. "You're not used to this," she said softly. Mr. Harrington shook his head. "No." She moved to the small kitchen and began to prepare tea. The aroma filled the space. "I have a doctor's appointment today," she commented, without looking at him. Mr. Harrington looked up. "I'm coming with you." She paused for just a second before continuing to move. "You have work." "Not today." That answer was simple, but it marked an internal rupture. His phone vibrated in his pocket once, then again, then a third time. He didn't need to look at it to know what it was. Urgent messages, calls from partners, reminders of meetings. The corporate world was beginning to demand his attention. Mr. Harrington slowly took it out and turned it off. The gesture was small, but symbolic. Sarah glanced at him. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "If I can't do this, then nothing else matters." Lily began to stir on the sofa, slowly opened her eyes, and seeing him still there, smiled, as if the world were in order. "Good morning, Daddy." The word was no longer an unconscious whisper. It was conscious, determined. Mr. Harrington felt that this simple phrase carried more weight than any corporate title. "Good morning, my dear." Sarah closed her eyes for a second, as if that scene both hurt and healed her at the same time. After the simple breakfast, they set off for the public clinic where she had her appointment. The building didn't have the sheen of the private centers Mr. Harrington frequented. The chairs were uncomfortable. The walls needed paint. The atmosphere was charged with uncertainty. And there he sat waiting, without privileges, without preferential access, just as another man concerned about someone he loved. Sarah looked at him. "You don't have to stay for the whole consultation." "Yes, I do." Lily was playing with a small doll she carried in her pocket. Every so often she would look up to make sure he was still there. And each time she saw him, she smiled. That smile was his constant examination. When they finally called Sarah, Lily squeezed Mr. Harrington's hand. "It's going to hurt her a lot." Mr. Harrington swallowed hard. "We're going to listen to what the doctor says, and then we'll see how to help her." He didn't promise the impossible, didn't disguise reality, but he didn't run either. The three of them went in. The doctor explained professionally that the surgery needed to be done soon, that the risk increased with time, that they needed a quick decision. Mr. Harrington listened to every word as if it were a verdict. It wasn't a contract. It wasn't an investment. It was life. Sarah maintained her composure, but her hand trembled slightly. Lily looked at both of them with wide eyes. "Mommy, will she get better?" The doctor spoke cautiously. "With surgery, the probabilities are good." Mr. Harrington took a breath. "Have it done at the best possible hospital." The doctor looked up, surprised by his determination. "That has a high cost." Mr. Harrington held his gaze. "It doesn't matter," Sarah intervened. "It does matter." Mr. Harrington looked at her. "I'm not buying absolution," he said firmly. "I'm doing what I should have done from the beginning." She held his gaze for a few seconds and nodded. The decision was made. But the real test came at that instant. His phone, which he had turned off, began to vibrate again as he turned it on to make a transfer. Dozens of messages, a critical meeting brought forward, an investment that depended on his physical presence. One of his partners wrote, If you're not here today, we lose the deal. Mr. Harrington felt the old reflex try to activate. That impulse to run, to prioritize business, to say, "This can't wait." But this time something was different. He looked at Lily. She was drawing on a piece of paper from the consulting room. There were 3 figures again, holding hands, and this time the father's figure was closer. Mr. Harrington understood that this was the real negotiation. Not with partners, not with markets, but with his own integrity. He took the phone, wrote a brief message. "I won't be there. Family priority." He sent it. Immediate silence in the chat. Then, an incredulous reply. "Since when?" Mr. Harrington left the phone on the table. "Since today." He didn't say it aloud, but he felt it. Sarah observed the gesture. "You just lost millions," she said calmly. Mr. Harrington looked at her. "I already lost 5 years. That was more expensive." She didn't respond, but something in her expression changed. Respect. When they left the clinic, the air felt different. Not because the problems were solved, but because the direction had changed. They walked in silence for a few minutes. Lily held both their hands, an imperfect family, but trying to be real. "Will you stay when Mummy is in surgery?" the girl asked. Mr. Harrington knelt in front of her. "I'm not going anywhere." Sarah watched him intently. She knew words were easy. The difficult part would be sustaining them over time. But she had seen something new that morning. She had seen renunciation. She had seen choice. She had seen coherence. And that wasn't easily faked. That night, as they returned to the flat, Mr. Harrington felt something he had never experienced in a board meeting. Fear. Not fear of losing money. Not fear of failing publicly. But fear of failing as a father again. That fear didn't paralyze him. It propelled him. They sat down for a simple supper. Lily spoke excitedly about school, about a friend, about a story she wanted him to hear. Mr. Harrington listened with absolute attention. He didn't interrupt. He didn't check the clock. He didn't review messages. Presence. Sarah watched him from the kitchen. There was still pain. There were open wounds. But there was also something unexpected. Hope. When Lily went to sleep, the flat fell silent. Mr. Harrington and Sarah stood face to face. "This doesn't erase the past," she said softly. "I know, and I don't forgive you yet." He nodded. "I didn't come to ask for immediate forgiveness." She looked at him with intensity. "And I came to see if you could stay." Mr. Harrington breathed deeply. "I don't know how to do it perfectly, but I want to learn." The sincerity was new in him, without strategy, without a prepared speech, just truth. She nodded slowly. "Then, let's start tomorrow." Mr. Harrington understood that reconstruction would not be an event. It would be a process, day after day, choice after choice. And as he looked at the small room where Lily slept peacefully, he understood that the greatest wealth he had ignored for years was just a few steps away. But there was still something missing. The surgery, the recovery, the adaptation, and a final test that would put his transformation to the test, because the outside world would not easily accept his change. And soon, he would have to defend this new priority in front of those who never understood the value of staying. The most difficult battle would not be against the past. It would be against the old version of himself. And that battle was just beginning. The surgery was scheduled for the following week. 7 days. 7 days that seemed a short time to the world, but an eternity for someone who was trying to rebuild what he had destroyed with absence. Mr. Harrington did not return to his mansion that week. He canceled meetings, delegated decisions, reorganized his agenda. His partners began to become uneasy. Some called directly, others sent ambiguous messages. One even appeared, unannounced, outside the modest building where he now spent most of his time. "What are you doing?" that incredulous partner asked him, looking at the surroundings with obvious discomfort. Mr. Harrington held his gaze without hesitation. "What I should have done years ago." The partner frowned. "You're risking huge investments for a personal situation." Mr. Harrington took a deep breath. Before, that phrase would have made him react. He would have felt questioned. He would have defended his position with figures and arguments, but now he didn't need to convince anyone. "It's not a personal situation," he replied with firm serenity. "It's my daughter." The partner was silent for a few seconds. "You never mentioned a daughter?" Mr. Harrington held his gaze. "I was never there for her." The silence was uncomfortable. The partner tried one last pressure. "The market doesn't wait. If you miss this opportunity, it might not come back." Mr. Harrington looked towards the flat window where Lily was drawing with absolute concentration. "Some opportunities never come back," he finally said, "and I already lost her once." The partner understood that he was not going to change his decision and left. Mr. Harrington closed the door calmly. That was the real test, not the surgery, not the money. It was upholding his choice in the face of the world that had always defined him. That night, while helping Lily with a school assignment, the girl looked up. "Will you leave when Mummy goes into hospital?" Mr. Harrington put the pencil on the table. "No, even if work calls you?" The question was innocent, but sharp. "Mr. Harrington smiled gently. "Work can wait." Lily tilted her head. "Mummy says adults sometimes say that, but don't always keep their word." Mr. Harrington felt the sting. It wasn't an accusation. It was experience. "Then look at me," he said, "and you decide if I keep my word." Lily watched him for a few seconds as if evaluating his sincerity, and then smiled. "I believe you." That trust shook him more than any business pressure because it was fragile and could easily break. The days passed amidst medical appointments, preparations, and simple moments. Mr. Harrington learned to prepare simple breakfast. He learned to read stories with exaggerated intonation. He learned to listen to stories without looking at the clock. Every gesture seemed small, but for him, it was revolutionary. Sarah observed everything with caution. One night, while Lily slept, they sat face to face. "I didn't think you'd stay," she admitted. "Neither did I," he replied with honesty. She looked at him intently. "What changed?" Mr. Harrington took a few seconds to answer. "I discovered that everything I built made no sense if I didn't know for whom I was building it." She looked down. "You always wanted to win." He nodded. "But I didn't understand that winning also meant staying." That phrase hung in the air. The surgery arrived. The hospital was modern, thanks to Mr. Harrington's decision to move her to a specialized center. Sarah was outwardly calm, but her hands revealed fear. Lily held Mr. Harrington's hand tightly. "It's going to hurt her a lot." Mr. Harrington knelt to her height. "The doctors know what they're doing, and I'm going to be here the whole time." Sarah looked at him before entering the operating room. There were no grand speeches, just a gaze laden with history. "Don't leave her alone," she said. "Never again," he replied. The door closed. The wait began, hours that felt like days. Mr. Harrington didn't look at his phone, didn't check emails, didn't respond to messages. He sat next to Lily, explaining what he could without lying. He told her stories, talked about stars, promised her that no matter what, she wouldn't be alone. In the midst of the wait, his phone vibrated insistently. It was the same critical negotiation he had postponed. A final message appeared. "Last chance. Confirm your presence now." Mr. Harrington looked at the screen. That decision would define not only his career but his integrity. He looked at Lily. The girl was resting her head on his shoulder, trying to be brave. Mr. Harrington turned off the phone again. Without drama, without doubt, just choice. Hours later, the doctor emerged. The surgery was successful. Lily threw herself into Mr. Harrington's arms. "I told you she was going to be all right." Mr. Harrington felt tears he couldn't contain. They weren't tears of guilt. They were tears of relief. Sarah was moved to recovery. When they could finally see her, Mr. Harrington held her hand. "It went well," he whispered. She slowly opened her eyes, looked at him, and for the first time in years, she didn't see distance, she saw presence. Days later, as she recovered at home, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived at the flat. It was from one of his main partners. It stated that despite his absence, they decided to maintain the agreement, that his stance on family had generated unexpected respect, that even investors valued leaders with clear principles. Mr. Harrington read the letter in silence. He hadn't expected that consequence, but he understood something profound. When you choose what's right, the world may take time to understand it, but it eventually respects it. Lily came closer. "Is it from work?" He nodded. "Are they going to scold you?" Mr. Harrington smiled. "No, this time." The girl hugged him. "Then you won." Mr. Harrington looked at her with tenderness. "Yes, but not because of work." She frowned curiously. "Then why?" He held her with firmness and softness at the same time. "Because I stayed." Lily smiled as if that answer was enough, and it was. That night, as the three of them had dinner together at a small table, full of conversation, Mr. Harrington understood that transformation was not a single event, it was a daily decision. He had passed the most difficult test, choosing to be a father. But something still remained. It wasn't enough to stay. He had to build. And in that small flat, among children's drawings and medicines neatly arranged on a shelf, Mr. Harrington knew that the true wealth he had ignored for years was just a few steps away. But there was still something more. The surgery, the recovery, the adaptation, and a final test that would challenge his transformation, because the outside world would not easily accept his change. And soon, he would have to defend this new priority in front of those who never understood the value of staying. The most difficult battle would not be against the past. It would be against the old version of himself. And that battle was just beginning. The following months were not perfect. There was no magical transformation, no instant reconciliation. There was no fairy tale life. There was reality, there was adaptation, there were uncomfortable conversations, there were memories that hurt, but above all, there was presence. Lily's mother slowly recovered. The surgery had been successful, but the process required patience. Mr. Harrington reorganized his life without announcing it publicly. He reduced travel, delegated strategic functions, stopped attending events he once considered indispensable. His partners noticed the change. Some drifted away, others were surprised. A few began to emulate him. Because when a leader changes their priorities, something shifts around them. But the deepest change didn't happen in the business world. It happened in the small flat where every afternoon Lily ran to the door when she heard his footsteps. "Daddy's here." That phrase became the most valuable sound in his life. Mr. Harrington learned things he had never considered important. He learned that a school assignment can be more urgent than a board meeting, that listening to a story repeated 5 times has more impact than a conference, that a spontaneous hug can heal years of distance. He learned to be present without an agenda, to stay without watching the clock, to listen without interrupting. One afternoon, as Lily was drawing at the table, she looked up. "Do you remember when you let me sit with you in the restaurant?" Mr. Harrington smiled. "Yes. I already knew it was you." Mr. Harrington tilted his head. "How?" Lily shrugged with childlike naturalness. "Because you looked sad, and Mummy says sad people sometimes just need someone to really look at them." Mr. Harrington felt a lump in his throat. For years, no one had really looked at him. They had admired him, they had needed him, they had respected him, but they hadn't seen him. That girl did. And that changed everything. Over time, Mr. Harrington decided something more. He didn't just want to help from within his home. He wanted to transform what he had learned into something bigger. He began to fund programs for absent fathers. He created guidance spaces for men who had prioritized work over family. He invested in public clinics that served mothers without resources. But this time, he didn't do it for image. There were no press conferences, no plaques with his name. There was silent action. One evening, as the 3 of them walked through a nearby park, Lily took both their hands. "Now, we really are a proper family." Sarah and Mr. Harrington looked at each other. There were scars, there was history, there were mistakes, but there was also decision. "Yes," he replied, "because now we choose each other every day." Lily smiled contentedly. Mr. Harrington understood something essential. Being a father was not a title. It was a daily practice, not an event, but constancy. One afternoon, as they were organizing boxes to move to a larger, not luxurious but comfortable place, Lily found her old drawing, the one with the 3 figures holding hands. She held it with pride. "Look," she said. "Now it really looks like us." Mr. Harrington looked at the drawing. The father's figure was no longer distant. He was in the center, holding both hands firmly. "Thank you for believing in me," he whispered. Lily frowned tenderly. "I didn't believe. I knew." That childlike certainty was the greatest gift he received. Over time, the old flat was left behind. Not out of shame, not out of rejection, but because now they could grow together. The new home had no excesses. It had balance. Mr. Harrington was still successful, but he was no longer obsessed. He had learned to say no to unnecessary meetings. He had learned that money is a tool, not an identity. He had learned that absence is more costly than any financial loss. One night, while Lily slept, Sarah approached Mr. Harrington. "Do you know what surprised me the most?" she asked. "What? That you didn't try to defend yourself when you knew the truth?" Mr. Harrington took a deep breath, because there was no possible defense. She nodded. "And that's what changed everything. Humility was not weakness, it was maturity." Mr. Harrington understood that true leadership is not exercised in boardrooms. It is exercised in intimate decisions, in staying when it is easier to leave, in listening when it is more comfortable to ignore, in taking responsibility when it is tempting to justify. Years later, When Lily was older, a teacher asked her to write an essay about the person who had most surprised her in her life. Lily wrote, "My daddy surprised me because he decided to stay. He didn't talk about money. He didn't talk about businesses. He didn't talk about gifts. He talked about presence." When Mr. Harrington read those lines, he understood that his greatest legacy would not be buildings or investments. It would be that phrase, "He decided to stay." Sometimes we believe that success is measured by what we accumulate, by what we achieve, by what we show to the world, but life silently evaluates us differently. It asks us, were you there when someone needed you? Did you choose to stay when it was uncomfortable? Did you truly look at those around you? Mr. Harrington in this story had everything except the most important thing, and it was a simple question asked by a hungry, hopeful girl that forced him to awaken. "Daddy, may I eat with you?" That question wasn't just about food. It was about companionship, about presence, about love. Because in the end, we don't remember how much we earned. We remember who was there. If today you have the opportunity to stay, do it. If you can call, call. If you can listen, listen. Because time doesn't turn back, but decisions can change the future. And sometimes the greatest act of love is not to promise, but to stay.